The apocalypse wasn't coming fast enough, apparently, so cue the radicalized extremist fundamentalist types to expedite the process. The sun is setting over my shoulder, and it's setting on human civilization. This is an emergency alert. 24 hours ago, I notified you that Hamas was calling for a worldwide uprising, a show of solidarity with the plight of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, who are currently being bombarded by Israel, in response, of course, to the heinous atrocities that we witnessed over the weekend. Now, the mainstream media caught wind of this global call to arms, essentially, and they're actually calling for surrounding Muslim countries to invade at that time. This is a literal call to arms, a call to every Muslim nation surrounding Israel to descend upon the border this Friday, which I guess will be our Thursday here in Canada. The mainstream media finally caught wind of this, and the politicians who find it politically useful to stifle dissent in whatever ways they deem fit have caught wind of this, but there's one other dot they're failing to connect, guys, and that this is going to coincide with the full-scale invasion of the Gaza Strip. Right now, you have hundreds of thousands of Israeli soldiers on the periphery of the Gaza Strip ready to descend and lay that place to waste. Okay, there are 2.3 million people there right now, and there's nothing Hamas wants more than for Israel to go ham in the Gaza Strip. This is what they want. Okay, and this is what a lot of people want. This is what Lindsey Graham's stock portfolio wants. And I'm going to talk about the reasons why I think that they all knew that this was coming at this particular time. Even the Egyptian intelligence insists that they had intelligence to suggest that this was going to happen, but nobody listened. And of course, now you can't criticize anything, right? You can't criticize anything Israel does or the American government. Now that's just taboo. And they're coming for your individual rights and freedoms, as they typically do with every single crisis. People never learn, okay? But this is going to coincide with the complete destruction of the Gaza Strip, and that's exactly what they want. And I would caution people, in the coming days and weeks ahead, if you're in a public place, if you're on a busy street and there's lots of people walking and there's none of those protective barriers on the road, we could very well see sleeper cells get activated. We could see the radicalization on a scale we've never before seen. There's no doubt that the Middle East is going to descend into total violence, especially in places where they have Western vassal states, these puppet dictators in there. Their populations are already calling for action as a response to the indiscriminate bombardment on the part of Israel in terms of what's happening in the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm not making any value judgments today. I'm just telling you what it's like. Okay, I'm telling you how it is. There's already been well over 1,000 airstrikes into Gaza Strip. And that has likely created untold levels of collateral damage and violence and a disproportionate response, as it typically is. It's usually a 10-to-1 kill ratio for the Israelis, okay? It is what it is. Again, this is not a value judgment, but I'm telling you right now, that's exactly what they want. Right now, there's no food, there's no water, there's no electricity. The humanitarian corridors, there is none. In fact, the supply train that is the supply convoys, Israel has threatened to destroy them. Okay, and that's coming from Egypt and from Jordan. Again, I'm not making value judgments. I'm telling you what the outcome of this is going to be. There's nothing Hamas wants more than this. They want every possible international law, every humanitarian law to be violated. They want war crimes galore so they can justify this global Islamic uprising. Okay? And understand that there's zealots on both sides of this debate. They're fanatics. They're all fanatics as far as I can tell. Religious people in general, the baseline average religious person, I love religious people. I truly do. I just think, the upstanding people, they go to church and this and that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ideological hardline extremists who bring geopolitics into the mix, and they got to go to this place and they got to do this and that. It's there's some in each religion, these fanatics that are bringing us to the brink of nuclear Armageddon. Like I said, the apocalypse wasn't coming fast enough. It's a much more volatile situation when you have religion involved. You see, with the Russians and Ukrainians and NATO and the United States, there's a little bit of rationality there. But you throw radical extremism into the mix, and this situation spirals out of control very, very fast, especially under the austere pressures of contracting economies around the world in the wake of COVID and the war in Russia and all that stuff. So I do foresee the situation getting wildly out of control. I would caution anybody, if you're in a public space this weekend and beyond, you need to be extremely situationally aware. I'm not saying you got to be paranoid. I'm just saying watch out, because we're likely going to see the activation of some sleeper cells. We're going to see more crazed incidents, more, trucks plowing through cars, crowds, and just, the most atrocious things that you can imagine. We're going to see it. And when the videos start to come out of children, Palestinian children, okay, being blown apart, and when they start doing that whole atrocity bait on Twitter and other various social media platforms, that's when the situation is just going to spiral out of control. Now, they knew this was coming. They knew this was coming. I mean, we all knew that the Israeli-Palestine situation had to culminate at some point. I mean, you look at the map and the shrinking geography of Palestine. It was only a matter of time. Okay, it was only a matter of time before something had to happen, before it had to go to its climax. And this is what that is. And I'm really not sure where the allegiances lie in the region. Right now you have 2 divisions of Egyptian troops near the border with Israel. Are they there to make sure that the flow of traffic is well maintained, or are they there to invade Israel? You just never know at this point in time in Israel. This is why they're calling in all the aircraft carriers. Case in point, isn't it interesting how the pre-positioning of all this military equipment started earlier in the year? And this is what I'm saying. They knew that shit was about to pop off, okay? And it's almost like they've been stoking, they've been pushing. Both sides are wanting more. Both sides, the upper echelons, benefit from extremism. Hamas benefits. Hamas wants the wholesale destruction of the Gaza Strip, I do believe. Because then what happens is this wakes up the sleeping giant that is the 2 billion strong Muslim world. Be it Sunnis, Shiites, it won't matter, okay? It's not going to matter. This could very well unify the Muslim world, and that's when things get nuclear in the Middle East, because Israel's left with no choice. They know they cannot conventionally defeat all of those forces. You have the Americans in there with their aircraft carriers. I mean, who knows how long those will even last with a shooting match with Iran, who has very sophisticated rockets, long-range missile systems, torpedoes, the whole 9 yards. And then you have the Russians who have their back. So this is a much more volatile situation than Ukraine and Russia. The only thing that makes it different is there's not as many nuclear weapons. It's not necessarily a mutually assured destruction scenario for the world, or at least there's going to be a bit of lag, okay? But I do think that after this weekend, when we see the results of this invasion of the Gaza Strip, which I presume is coming soon because they're mobilizing in and around that region, I presume that that's when people are going to just start losing their minds. You already have Canadian politicians and UK politicians calling for the banning of Palestinian flags. And all I'm going to say, no matter what side you are on, because I see many people who are on the other side of that barrel, okay, that gun, for the last 3 years. They've already forgotten what the grand master plan is, the draconian crackdown. Remember when you didn't want to get the intervention, what they said about you. Remember when you didn't agree with the war, what they said. Just be careful what you wish for, is all I'm going to say. Because there's going to be protests, there's going to be extremist acts. And again, the government, they love a good extremist act, which will give them the license they need to crack down on civil rights and freedoms even more. Okay? There's going to be some incident, and they're going to say, oh, this is why we need to regulate guns more, or something like that. There's going to be somebody do some crazy shit as a result of this. Because when the photos and the videos come out of what they're going to do to the Gaza Strip, the Muslim world is going to lose its mind. And that whole situation, that powder keg, is going to explode. You had the pre-positioning of troops in the Persian Gulf, aircraft carriers. Conveniently, this Gerald R4, this new, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, just happened to be down the street from all of this, is now parked right outside of Israel. And they're calling in another one. You don't bring in aircraft carriers for the Gaza Strip. You anticipate a full-scale war. And these surrounding regions, be it Hezbollah, be it the Iranians, the Yemenis, various factions in Iraq, who knows if Al-Qaeda and ISIS are going to play into this somehow. I mean, the whole thing could just blow at any moment. So watch out. Watch your back is all I'm going to say. Be very, very careful from this point forward, because it seems as though, and that's not the only indicator. I mean, you had the price of oil spike over the last few months. It went up like 25, 30%. And now it's kind of plateauing after the events have happened, which makes you think, did somebody price this in, right? And then you had the waffling on the Ukrainian issue, just so perfectly timed a few months in advance of this whole thing, right? You had that situation with Elon Musk, with the ADL on Twitter, like that just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, was there a big problem? Like, there was no major event that triggered. I mean, there was the Kanye stuff earlier in the year, right? That maybe started that conversation, but all this happens. And then you had the constant provocations by settlers in Israel towards the Palestinians in the run-up to this. You had lots of domestic unrest. Now Netanyahu, who many Israelis do not like because of all the judicial reform stuff, he has a blank check to do whatever he wants. And I'm a person who, I think I have a good sense for body language. And there was something about his reaction to this whole thing. He just seemed a little bit too, I don't want to say excited, but just the alacrity he demonstrated to get going on things just didn't sit right with me, okay? Be careful with atrocity bait. A death is a death. Suffering is suffering, in my personal opinion. The atrocities committed in Israel were heinous. I can't watch it. I can't watch that stuff. I can't watch the stuff of the Palestinian kids being pulled out of the rubble. I can't watch it, man. Because it is, I know we need to understand what's going on. We can't be viscerally detached from that. We need to understand. But on all sides, there's extremism on all sides. And the more Israel is disproportionate in their response, the more freedom fighters they're going to create. That's exactly what Hamas wants. They want them to go in there and commit so many violations, so many breaches of international law. That's exactly what they're hoping for, because that's going to awaken the Muslim world, and it's going to radicalize people across the map. It's going to cause global chaos. And don't forget, we still have a nuclear war pending with Russia, right? We still have climate chaos around the world unfolding day after day after day. We still have this looming financial crisis. Now, I just wanted to cover that in particular today, because I do believe, and the Egyptian government believes, because they were trying to notify the Israelis, that somebody knew this stuff was coming. And I'm just going to watch what they do with this crisis, okay? And you'll notice that everybody's divided now, right? It's now either you're a political Zionist or you're not, or that's the new divide between, it's no longer Ukraine, Russia, and you're seeing all these overlapping, these Venn diagrams of I'm a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Now everybody's divided once again. There was this, we were starting to kind of get unified and be able to make some moves, and now Robert F. Kennedy is running as an independent, and this is all, to me it just seems like classic playbook stuff. But we got just a few data points of the news for you to consider today. U.S. Army Screaming Eagles set to bolster forces in Jordan amid regional tensions. So you have some elements of the 101st Airborne, which were recently redeployed to various parts of Europe. They were originally in Romania, and then I think they were redeployed to other parts of Europe. Now, some of them being deployed to Jordan. So you know this shit's getting ready to go down. The USS Dwight Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group will be deployed to the Eastern Mediterranean. Lindsey Graham has declared a holy war. I tell you, man, I want to see Lindsey Graham's portfolio. I guarantee you it's Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. Like, that's 90% of his portfolio. All military-industrially complex stocks. That's what he's going for. We got the entire West Bank under lockdown. Okay? Understandably so. The shit is going down in Israel. I was talking to a guy there yesterday, and yeah, sirens are going off, and you know, I mean, everybody there knows somebody who was taken out. There's people who are still missing, so it's a terrible situation. But if I was Israel, I would prosecute this situation in a very, very measured way, where I tried to make the punishment fit the crime as much as possible. I would show sympathy. I would make humanitarian corridors, because if you don't, you may have a short-term win, but it's going to be long-term pain. Long-term pain. And what's likely going to happen is it's going to be a call to arms for the entire Muslim world, who are going to conventionally overwhelm Israel's forces, and Israel's going to be forced to use a nuclear weapon somewhere to make a point. And when that happens, we learn whether or not Iran has nuclear weapons. We learn whether or not Pakistan is going to come to their back. Because yes, there is nuclear armed nations. One of them is Pakistan. Are the Turks, are the Jordanians, are the Syrians, are the Russians, the Chechens, are they going to come to the aid of the Palestinians? That is the question. And when that happens, is it about to get nukey up in here? Oh, man, this is bad. As if we didn't have enough to worry about already. Vladimir Zelensky has arrived at NATO headquarters in Brussels. For the first time, I believe, since the war started. That's big. Big talks are happening behind the scenes. The shit's going down in Bakhmut. The Russians are pressing hard. They're trying to form a cauldron. And it appears as though they might do it. The Ukrainian soldiers that I've seen in videos recently look very demoralized. They look tired. Lots of them have been on duty for 18 months. They haven't been rotated out. And they're exhausted. And it doesn't look good for Ukraine. If Russia wins in Ukraine and the U.S. blows whatever they're getting ready to do in the Middle East, and then China starts some shit, North Korea starts some shit, boy, are we in trouble at that point. Now get a load of this. Russian Foreign Intelligence Director believes that the West trained Ukraine to attack Russian nuclear facilities. Oh yeah, and I forgot about the whole Baltic pipeline incident, which is still ongoing. They're still tacitly blaming the Russians for doing that. And right now they're doing an investigation. They're saying it's going to take a few days. They're saying, well, it might have been an anchor of a big ship that got pulled across this, but these things are supposed to be built for that. So I'm not buying that. And this is a very busy corridor. Okay? So either the Russians did it as a retaliation for Nord Stream, or it was another, you know, I don't want to say the word because I don't want to trigger the algorithm, but false flag egg, okay? Anyways, if that is true, that the Brits were training the Ukrainians to run sabotage operations on Russian nuclear facilities, boy, are we in trouble. Do not take your eyes off Russia in the Baltic Sea. Apparently, the Russians may have lost another ship in the Baltic Sea. I just said yesterday that the NATO reconnaissance planes were running surveillance operations in the Black Sea, very, very close to where the new port is for the Russian fleet. And suddenly, they run into one of their own mines, or at least that's what they're trying to say. Something doesn't smell right. I do believe that this force that we're seeing the United States amass in and around the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean is anticipating some bigger shit going down in not the Mediterranean, but the Black Sea. UK may arrest people for waving Palestinian flags. Yeah, they're coming for you. According to Putin's brain, Alexander Dugin, he says no matter how we feel about the Jewish people and Muslims, the issue is fundamental. Iran is our friend, ally, and brother who supported Russia in a difficult moment, but Israel is not. It is a vassal of the United States. There you go. World War III. These are the teams. This is on the team of the axis of evil. You got Pakistan. You got Iran. You got Syria. You probably may get Jordan if that government falls. You might even get Saudi Arabia. You got Yemen, okay? You got possibly Egypt, who's on the fence. They need that cheap Russian food. They got a huge population that they have to feed. You got, of course, the Russians. You have the Belarusians. You have the Serbs, possibly. You have China. You have North Korea. And I'm sure there's a lot of other neutral states, BRICS adjacent nations that will likely join that fight. But we're starting to see that this isn't all just Russia and Russia and China, okay? There are proxies all over the place, from Africa to Asia. NATO vows to respond if Finland-Estonia gas pipeline damage is determined to be deliberate. I guess we're going to see what happens. Is that going to be the big story they bounce back to? People were taking John Kirby's words out of context today at a press conference where people were claiming that he said that the tap is running dry and that they're not going to be able to fund Ukraine much longer, but it was taken out of context. What he's saying was this is temporary aid until we can get the next spending bill put through. And what they're going to do is they're just going to bundle it with what's going on, the aid that's going to be delivered to Israel, because nobody in the House is going to speak out against what's going on right now. It's too taboo. It's career self-deletion for them to do so. So they're going to bundle it up. They're going to say, okay, we're going to give Israel 8 and maybe we'll give Ukraine 100 billion, and you're not going to say no because it'll be a bad thing if you do. What else did I say was going to happen yesterday? Well, an incident at Israel's nuclear facility where they probably keep their nuclear weapons. An incident occurred at the nuclear center in Israeli Dimona. The incident occurred in the area of the Nuclear Research Center in the Israeli Dimona. Now, I don't know if they keep their nuclear weapons there. I highly doubt it. I'm sure they're in bunkers somewhere. I'm sure they're very well dug in. Who knows what sort of deep underground military complexes are under Jerusalem. A security-related incident occurred at a facility in Dimona in southern Israel. Details of the incident are not yet clear. Apparently, there was some kind of gunfire around there, all right? On the morning of October 7th, Israel is subjected to an unprecedented rocket attack from Gaza after massive shelling Hamas fighters entered the border, blah, 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 blah. The military wing of the Palestinian movement announced Operation Al-Aqsa Flood in response to the IDF announced the Operation Iron Swords in the Gaza Strip, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the point here. I guess it's not bright out anymore. They don't really provide any more details for this. I got to put these back on. Jeez, you get used to that. Anyways, guys, get ready. I was going to go so far to encourage people to get bulletproof vests because, especially if you live in a Canadian province that is permissive of that, you can get these bulletproof inserts for your kids' backpacks. And I know this sounds crazy, man, but I do believe that we're going to see some extremist acts, unfortunately. And the only people who benefit from that in the end, it's not the fanatics. It's the government who benefits because then they can bring in more laws, bring in more reasons for you to have less rights. But body armor, if you can legally, we can't do it here in Canada, but if you can legally conceal carry, just watch your six, man, because, this shit could pop off. And it would be a good segue into the apocalypse to have civil unrest first. Like you'd almost think that before the mushroom clouds come, there'd be riots in the streets and people losing their frickin' minds. And again, the economic pressure that everybody is under right now doesn't make the situation better. It only increases the likelihood. And when you have a group of people like the Palestinians who spend the majority of their lives, you got to understand the perspective of, like, we think about North Koreans, okay? Think about the mindset of a North Korean completely disconnected from the world, from the internet. Now, you have the Palestinians who are connected to that internet. Not so much the people in the West Bank. They can kind of travel a bit more, and the Gazans can travel as well, but it's very, very difficult. It's very unlikely that most of the people there have ever been outside of those gates. And they have the internet. They see the world, okay, but they cannot access it. They have no opportunities. And what are you going to do all day if you have no opportunities? You're going to plot against the prison guards. And that's exactly what has happened. And this is really the final act. Not to get prophetic on you guys, but according to Mr. Rafi Farber, who, little did I know, he knew a lot about this biblical prophecy and the Torah and all this stuff. We're going to release a video in the next couple days here. Well, he tells me that we got about 4 or 5 months left until this culmination to this end times prophecy. And he's not somebody who's like, okay, this is going to happen. It's not a hill he's going to die on, but he just, you know, floats it out there as an interesting anecdote, I guess, for you to consider. One crisis after another, hey? Just one thing after another. This was planned. This was planned.